You probably believe that sending more messages will pull them closer to you. It will not. Actually, every additional text you send is quietly doing the opposite, pushing them further away. And nobody ever sits you down and explains this. Nobody tells you why the avoidant person in your life suddenly goes cold the instant things start to feel good between you. Nobody hands you the actual language that works until right now. Here is something most people never grasp about avoidant attachment. Every rule you have learned about connecting with someone you like, every instinct that has served you with other people, none of it applies here. The moves that work beautifully on someone secure, someone emotionally open, someone who genuinely wants to be close to you, those exact same moves will blow up in your face with an avoidant. And if you have already been trying to love an avoidant the way you would love anyone else, you already know this firsthand. You have felt them retreat. You have sat with the confusion. You sent something warm and thoughtful and watched them go silent in response. You poured your energy into building something and somehow came out the other side with less than you started with. That pattern ends today. What I am about to hand you are 4 distinct kinds of messages. Not vague, feel-good advice, not fluffy platitudes, but specific approaches grounded in the actual psychology behind why they work on someone with an avoidant nervous system. Because the moment you understand how an avoidant brain processes communication, the moment you can see exactly what triggers their walls and what quietly disarms them, you will never text the same way again. But before we get into the actual messages, there is something foundational you need to understand first, something that will completely reshape how you see this person. An avoidant is not cold because they lack feeling. They are cold because they feel far too much, and somewhere along the way, they learned that feeling deeply leads directly to pain. Somewhere in their past, likely early on, they absorbed the lesson that depending on another person emotionally was dangerous, that needing someone was a setup for getting hurt. So they built a wall. A remarkably effective, remarkably convincing wall. And from behind that wall, they are still watching you. They notice you far more than you might think. They are often more drawn to you than they will ever let on. But the second they feel that pull growing too strong, something inside them slams a kind of internal alarm and they retreat. This is not a personal rejection, even though I know it feels exactly like one. It is a reflex. It is nearly automatic. The avoidant is not sitting there scheming about how to hurt you. They are sitting there thinking, this is getting too close, and closeness has always cost me something before. So the real question is not how do I get this person to like me more? The real question is, how do I communicate in a way that does not set off that internal alarm? How do I build connection without crowding them? How do I make them feel pulled toward me without making them feel cornered? And the answer lives inside 4 very specific approaches to texting. The first approach is what I like to call the no pressure check-in. And to understand why it works so well, you first need to understand why pressure is the single biggest threat to an avoidant person. When an avoidant receives a message loaded with emotional weight, something that demands they match your energy, respond at a certain level, or validate what you're feeling, something in them quietly shuts down. It is not that they do not want to respond to you, it is that the expectation itself feels like a wall closing in around them. Even something as simple as, "How are you?" can feel heavy if it arrives carrying the unspoken subtext of, "I need you to emotionally show up for me right now." The no pressure check-in strips all of that weight away entirely. It sounds something like this. "Hey, no need to respond right away. Just thought of you when I saw this." And then you attach something genuinely relevant to who they are, a meme tied to something they love, a news piece about a subject they actually care about, a photo that reminded you of a specific moment you shared together, and then nothing else. No question fishing for a reply, no "I miss you" tucked onto the end, no subtle hint that you're sitting there waiting. That's the whole message. Clean, light, sincere. So why does this land so effectively with someone avoidant specifically? Because you have done something almost nobody ever does for them. You have removed the expectation entirely. You told them, before they even had the chance to feel trapped, that the exit is right there, wide open, no pressure at all. And paradoxically, that is exactly the moment they stop bracing to run. Avoidants don't actually flee from people themselves. They flee from obligation. They flee from the sense of owing someone something. The instant they feel indebted emotionally, they vanish. But when nothing is owed, when the message is genuinely just a passing thought about them with no strings attached, the avoidant brain can finally exhale. And once it can breathe, it can actually respond. You will likely notice that this style of message gets answered faster than almost anything more emotionally loaded you have ever sent them. Not every single time, avoidants are unpredictable by nature, but far more often than you would expect. There's an even more powerful version of this move, one where what you share ties back to something specific they once told you, not something generic, something precise. If they mentioned once that their relationship with their hometown is complicated, and you send them a strange little article about that exact city, you are showing them something significant. You are proving that you were listening, that you were truly present, that you remembered, and that you are asking for absolutely nothing back. That's the kind of gesture that lingers. The avoidant will lie there that night thinking about it, because most people in their life have never simply given them something without expecting something in return. The second approach is what I call the confident low investment reach out, and pulling this one off requires you to genuinely be in a certain headspace first. You cannot fake your way through this one. The avoidant will pick up on it instantly if you try. Here's roughly what it sounds like, something along the lines of "just had the weirdest day, you would have laughed. Hope yours was better." Or maybe, "this city is full of characters today, you would have hated it," which of course secretly means you would have loved every second. Short, specific to them, and fully self-contained. Notice exactly what's happening in that message. You are sharing a slice of your own life. You're letting them in, just briefly. You're referencing them in a way that shows you genuinely know who they are as a person, and then you're closing the loop yourself. You are not leaving it dangling open for them to feel obligated to fill in. You're not asking, "Tell me about your day," or "What are you up to?" You are simply inviting them into your world for one small moment and then quietly stepping back out. This works because avoidants are deeply pulled toward people who clearly have lives of their own, not people who merely claim they have their own lives, but people who actually demonstrate it. The fact that you have a story worth sharing, that something genuinely happened to you, that you found it worth mentioning at all of that signals that you are someone with presence, with forward motion, with a life that exists independently of them. And here's the important part about that. An avoidant will instinctively pull away from someone who seems to be orbiting entirely around them, someone who has apparently made them the center of their whole world, because that feels like pressure, like a weight settling on their chest. But someone who is visibly living their own life, having their own experiences, clearly not sitting by the phone refreshing it every few minutes, becomes genuinely interesting to them. That person becomes something worth reaching toward instead of something to escape from. The second key ingredient in this message is tone. Confident, not cocky, not performative, just calm and grounded. There's an ease running through it, a lightness. You aren't trying to impress them. You aren't fishing for a response. You are simply being a person, someone with a voice, a perspective, and a life genuinely worth getting to know. The open door callback is a low-pressure message that gently reconnects with an avoidant without chasing or withdrawing. By referencing a shared plan and leaving the invitation open with no urgency, you communicate patience, acceptance, and continued interest. This can help reduce an avoidant's fear of rejection or punishment for needing space. The approach is most effective only when it is sincere rather than a tactic to provoke guilt or a response. The fourth message tends to surprise people more than any of the others because it runs directly against every instinct you have when you like someone. I call it the disappearing act. And it's really less of a single text and more of an entire texting philosophy. Here's how it plays out. You send something engaging, something with a little bit of spark to it, and then you genuinely go quiet. Not strategically quiet, where you're secretly checking your phone every 8 minutes waiting for a reply. Actually quiet. You go live your life fully. You make plans. You finally do the thing you've been putting off for weeks. You call that friend you keep meaning to call. You get to the gym or take that walk or start that project you've been sitting on. You genuinely step out of the waiting room entirely. And while you're doing that, something shifts inside the avoidant's mind, because the avoidant is used to being the one who creates distance. That's their move. That's how they've always maintained control over the emotional temperature of a connection. When you suddenly become the one who isn't right there, available, visible, and waiting, something changes for them. Curiosity flickers to life. Avoidants are not immune to missing people, not even close. They actually miss people quite deeply. They simply rarely admit it, even to themselves. But when someone they're genuinely drawn to becomes less available, that feeling rises to the surface anyway. The question forms on its own. Where did they go? Are they okay? Did something shift? Are they losing interest? And that question, that small seed of uncertainty, is actually healthy for a connection with an avoidant. Not manufactured uncertainty, not manipulative games, but the natural kind of uncertainty that comes from two people genuinely leading separate lives, from you not being endlessly on standby, from you being someone with actual places to go and things to do. The message that follows your quiet stretch should feel completely casual and unbothered. It should read like you simply resurfaced because something genuinely reminded you of them, or because you wanted to share a moment, not because you've been counting the days since they last replied, not because the silence was quietly eating you alive, just because a thought crossed your mind and you decided to send it. That combination, genuine disengagement followed by light, easy re-engagement, is one of the most powerful communication rhythms you can build with an avoidant person. It mirrors the exact rhythm they instinctively crave. It gives them the space they're always unconsciously searching for, and then it offers connection back without any demand attached to it. Now I want to talk about something that sits quietly underneath all four of these approaches, because the messages themselves are not actually the real point here. They're simply the vehicle. What matters far more is the energy you're texting from in the first place. If you're living in a constant low hum of anxiety about this person, if you're scrutinizing every word before you hit send, if you're decoding every reply for some hidden meaning, if you're lying awake at night trying to piece together exactly where you stand with them, then even the most carefully crafted message in the world is still going to carry that anxious undercurrent with it. People feel energy. We are remarkably good at sensing when someone is calm versus when someone is quietly desperate, even through a screen, even through just a handful of words. So as much as I want you to internalize these four specific messages, I want you even more to understand the internal shift required to actually use them well. That shift is about genuinely becoming less consumed by this person, not as a manipulation tactic, not as some clever trick to make them want you more, but as a real recalibration of where your attention actually lives day to day. Because right now, if you're deep in the middle of this with an avoidant, I'd guess a significant chunk of your mental energy every single day is going toward this one person, toward what they meant by something, toward what they might say next, toward what you should do, toward whether they're even thinking about you at all. And that's completely understandable. Avoidant dynamics create a genuinely addictive kind of emotional push and pull. The intermittent closeness followed by sudden distance, the hope and confusion looping through you over and over, all of it lights up the same regions of the brain as other compulsive behaviors do. That's not a character flaw on your part, that's simple biology at work. But you can interrupt that cycle. You interrupt it by genuinely investing in the other parts of your life, not as a manufactured confidence technique, but because your own life, your own goals, your own relationships, your own experiences, all of that genuinely deserves your attention regardless of this one person. And once you start actually giving those things your real attention, something interesting happens. You become more interesting yourself, not because you're performing it for an audience, but because you're truly living it. And the avoidant, who tends to be remarkably perceptive, who has likely been watching you far more closely than you probably realize, starts to notice that shift. They notice that you're different now, that you're no longer waiting around, that you have things happening in your life, that you're a person genuinely in motion. And a person in motion is extraordinarily magnetic to someone who has spent their entire life standing emotionally still. Let me take you a little deeper into avoidance psychology for a moment, because I think it will build more compassion in you for this person, and also more clarity about what you're actually navigating. People with avoidant attachment patterns generally learned very early in life that their emotional needs were either ignored outright or responded to inconsistently. In some cases, they had caregivers who were loving in their own way, but genuinely unable to handle big emotions, who would shut down or grow visibly uncomfortable whenever the child expressed real need. In other cases, there may have been something closer to active rejection. Whatever the specific circumstance was, the child drew a conclusion from it. The conclusion was that needing people is not safe, that the only way to stay okay is to stop needing anyone at all. So they became fiercely self-sufficient in the most extreme sense of the word. They internalized the belief that they were fine entirely on their own, that they didn't need closeness, that connection was something optional, something they could take or leave without consequence. And for a long stretch of time, that belief genuinely protected them. It shielded them from the pain of dependency. It gave them a real sense of control over their world. But what it also did quietly was prevent them from ever experiencing the kind of deep, sustained connection that every human being fundamentally needs to thrive. And underneath all the walls, underneath the independence and the practiced coolness, the avoidant often aches for exactly that kind of connection. They simply don't know how to have it without panic shutting the whole system down. This is exactly why patience matters so profoundly with this kind of personality. Not endless, boundless patience, not martyrdom, not permanently shelving your own needs indefinitely, but a steady, calm presence that quietly tells them you aren't going anywhere, that you don't threaten them, and that you won't fall apart the moment they need a little bit of space. That kind of steadiness is genuinely rare in a partner, and to an avoidant who has unconsciously been testing nearly everyone they meet for signs of emotional instability or suffocation, it is profoundly, quietly attractive. Now let me say something that might be a bit harder to hear. Not every avoidant is actually ready to do the work required. Not every avoidant, no matter how carefully you word your texts, no matter how patient you manage to be, no matter how well you regulate your own energy, is going to meet you where you genuinely need to be met. Some people are simply at a stage in their own personal journey where the walls are not coming down anytime soon, full stop, and you staying locked in that dynamic, holding the door open indefinitely with no end in sight, isn't actually doing either of you any favors. Part of what these four approaches are really about is giving you a framework that's emotionally healthy for you, not just strategically effective on them. The no pressure check-in is good for you because it forces you to genuinely let go of the outcome. The confident, low investment message is good for you because it requires you to actually have something real going on in your own life. The open door call back is good for you because it releases you from simmering resentment. And the disappearing act is good for you because it requires you to actually go out and live. So even if this particular person never comes around, everything I'm describing here will still make you more grounded, more magnetic, and more emotionally healthy in every single relationship you carry forward from here. That's not some consolation prize. That's honestly the entire point. Let's talk for a moment about what not to do, because sometimes knowing what to steer clear of is just as valuable as knowing what to actually pursue. Do not send several messages back to back if you haven't gotten a reply yet. One message is a reach. 2 starts to feel like pressure building. 3 starts to feel like pursuit. And to an avoidant, pursuit triggers precisely the reflex you're trying so hard to avoid. Let the message have room to breathe. If they haven't responded, it's not because they didn't see it, it's because they're processing it in whatever way they process things internally. Let them process. Do not turn your texts into a vehicle for working through your own emotions. This one matters a lot. When you're anxious and confused about where things stand, when you're lying awake at 2 a.m. trying to make sense of everything happening, the urge to send a message becomes enormous. The pull to crack the conversation open, to finally get some clarity, to say exactly what you're feeling is completely understandable. But with an avoidant, this kind of message will almost always backfire on you. It will feel like too much, arriving too soon, weighing too heavy, and they will retreat further. If you need to process what you're feeling, process it with a friend, process it in a journal, process it in the comments here if that helps. But don't make the avoidant your emotional processing partner, not unless and until the relationship has genuinely grown to a place where they've explicitly shown you they can hold that kind of space. Do not punish them for needing space either. This one is subtle but genuinely important. If they go quiet for a few days and then eventually reach back out, don't greet them with coldness. Don't respond with a clipped, distant answer designed to make sure they notice you clocked their absence. Don't perform distance as a kind of quiet revenge, because the second you do that, you confirm their deepest underlying fear. You confirm that connection really is dangerous, that getting close genuinely does cost something, that the warmth disappears the moment they pull back even slightly. Instead, when they resurface, meet them with warmth, genuine warmth, nothing excessive, nothing performative, nothing that screams, "Look how fine I am without you." Just warmth. "Hey, good to hear from you." And then meet them exactly where they are. That response, that non-punishing, welcoming response, is one of the most powerful things you can offer an avoidant. It breaks the pattern they've come to expect. It slowly teaches them that coming back is genuinely safe. Do not over-explain yourself either. Avoidance can sometimes create situations where you feel compelled to justify your own behavior or lay out your feelings in exhaustive detail. They might say something dismissive or confusing, and you feel this urge rising to unpack your entire emotional landscape so they truly understand where you're coming from. Resist that urge. Keep your emotional disclosures short, clear, and light. The longer and more detailed your explanation becomes, the more overwhelming it feels to them. The simpler and calmer you stay, the easier it becomes for them to remain present in the conversation with you. Now let's talk about timing, because when you text an avoidant matters almost as much as what you actually say. Late night messages are something of a mixed bag. On one hand, people tend to be more emotionally open at night. Guards come down naturally, the noise and distraction of the day fades away. But late-night texts also carry an undertone of vulnerability and need that an avoidant can find genuinely overwhelming. If you're going to send something at night, keep it very light, something funny, something that asks nothing of them, not anything emotionally loaded or searching for meaning. Morning messages tend to work well when they stay casual and reference something specific. A plain good morning by itself can feel like an obligation to respond immediately. Good morning paired with something specific about their day or something you genuinely thought of carries a little more texture and feels far less demanding. Midday messages are often the most underrated of all. People are right in the middle of their lives at that point. A message that arrives midday doesn't require an immediate response and simply sits there ready to be picked up whenever it makes sense. That's comfortable territory for an avoidant person. And what about texting after conflict or tension between you? Wait longer than you think you actually need to. Avoidants need real time to come back down after something has felt emotionally charged. What feels like a short window to you might feel like an eternity to them. Give them more room than seems entirely reasonable. Then reach out with something light, not a reference to the tension itself unless they bring it up first. Just warmth and a sense of normalcy, a quiet signal that the static has cleared. Loving an avoidant is not automatically a mistake to make. It genuinely depends on two things: their own self-awareness and your actual needs. If they recognize their patterns and are genuinely working to grow, change becomes possible. But if they consistently blame everyone else and avoid taking any accountability, the relationship can become deeply painful over time. At the same time, your needs still matter just as much. If they cannot offer emotional presence, real communication, or basic consistency, no clever strategy is going to close that gap for you. Yes, give them space. Yes, communicate in ways that don't trigger their instinct to withdraw. But also, stay honest with yourself about the reality of the situation. Are they actually making effort, even slowly? Are they genuinely moving toward connection, or has everything stayed entirely one-sided this whole time? You deserve someone who actually tries. These 4 messages work because they align naturally with avoidant psychology. They reduce pressure, they create safety, and they allow connection to happen without triggering that instinct to retreat. But your role in all of this was never to tear down their walls for them. That work belongs to them alone. Your role is simply to stop reinforcing the belief that those walls are necessary in the first place. And the real goal here is bigger than just getting a text back from someone. It's about becoming calmer, clearer, and more genuinely grounded in yourself. When you build that kind of steady presence, the right people naturally start moving closer to you. The goal was never to force anyone into wanting you. The goal has always been to create the conditions where something real actually has room to grow.